My name is Emma Garcia. I'm a UX architect, and yes, I'm quiet. I work at Northbyte Tech in Minneapolis, a big IT holding company where everything revolves around loud voices, quick decisions, and weekly meetings in a conference room overlooking the Mississippi River. When I first joined, I thought silence was my flaw, that I needed to somehow wake up, learn to stand up with a coffee in my hand and shout, "Listen to me." But I'm not like that. I listen. I think. I notice what others miss, not because I'm silent, but because I observe. Back then, I just didn't realize that this could be my strength. My manager was Brad Hopkins, a classic leader, tall, confident, loud, always with the same Starbucks cup and the same comments at every meeting like, "Move fast, break things. We need drivers, not passengers. You've got brains, Emma, but you lack charisma." He said it almost kindly, like he wanted to help, but every word felt like a nail sealing the lid on my career growth. At meetings, I was always prepared. Slides, analytics, details nobody else noticed. Every time I raised my hand to say, "I have a suggestion for the user flow structure." Before I could finish, someone louder would speak up and voice my idea, sometimes word for word, and get approval, Brad's smile, comments like, "See, that's what I'm talking about." And I'd sit there, soaking it in, forcing a smile, and asking myself, maybe it's true. To be a leader, you have to be louder? One day during a team retrospective, I finally spoke up about it. I said I felt my ideas were getting lost, that not everyone got equal attention, that it's important to create a culture where people listen, not interrupt. Brad's response? "I get it, Emma. You just need to be more assertive. You're good, but too quiet to lead." I remember that word too. It sounded like not only was I not fitting in, but my quietness was a defect, not a choice. That day, I drove home in complete silence. No music, no radio, nothing in the car, just my breath and my thoughts swirling like a whirlpool. I wanted to scream, but I don't scream. I wrote one phrase in my notebook. What if my silence is my strength? I was always told I was quiet. First at school, teachers wrote in my records, "reserved." Doesn't show initiative. Then in college, great projects, but too silent during defenses. And now here in corporate America, where noise is talent and silence is weakness. But that night, for the first time, I thought, I don't have to be loud. I have to be precise. I don't have to speak more often. I have to speak smarter. I didn't know it then, but that evening someone was born the person who would one day build her own company. No loud slogans, no fight for the microphone, just an idea, work. And results that would speak for themselves. For now. I was still working at Northbyte. I was still listening. I was still gathering. But inside, something was growing. Something that would one day turn everything around in my favor. That evening, when Brad said again that I was too quiet to be a leader, I was walking home on foot. Minneapolis was gray and damp. The streetlights cast long, blurred shadows on the sidewalk. And I felt those shadows were like the comments I had heard my whole life. "You're so quiet. You could be great if you just spoke up a little. You seem smart, but where's the spark?" I remembered how in 9th grade my history teacher gave me a B, even though I handed in the best paper. "Emma, you have the facts, but no energy. Leaders need to be charismatic." In university, during my thesis defense, I spoke calmly and clearly. Afterwards, I heard, "Convincing, but lacks drive. You have to sell your ideas." Every time I stayed silent, not because I had nothing to say, but because everything I wanted to say had already been said, clearly, to the point, without theatrics. At home, I sat down at the table and opened my old paper notebook. It was almost empty, just a couple of technical notes and quotes. But this time, I wrote something different. What if my strength is precisely in the silence? What if they just don't understand another form of leadership? I didn't want to change myself to prove my worth to anyone, but I realized that to change their perception, I needed to give them not a reason to argue, but a reason to fall silent in awe. And then I decided I would study leadership on my own terms. Not charisma, not shouting, not owning the room, but precision, depth, attention, responsibility. I enrolled in a course at Harvard Extension School, Leadership and Influence for Technical Teams. The professor started his lectures with, "Real leaders don't talk louder, they listen better." I fell in love with that. With cases where one manager's silence calmed the entire team. With stories where leadership is structure, not a spectacle. At the same time, I began reading everything I could from Susan Cain's Quiet, The Power of Introverts to Sun Tzu's Military Strategies. I realized, not all power is noisy. Sometimes the most effective power is inevitability. When you simply do the work, without noise, without words. But everyone sees the result and falls silent. And one day, after another lesson, I wrote, "I won't argue, I will show. My next project will speak for me." I set a goal for myself, to create work, design, and solutions so strong that it wouldn't matter how I presented them. They would be so powerful that they would become my microphone. And at that moment, I felt something shift inside me. I stopped being angry at myself for being quiet. I stopped envying those who could command a room in 3 sentences. I decided my silence would not be a weakness, but a strike. Soft, slow, but precise, and ruthlessly effective. Because I knew this. People may not hear the quiet ones, but they always notice the results. At the beginning of March, work started in the office on a new project, a mobile app for monitoring cardiovascular health. It was called Pulse Track. The project was important, a partnership with a major insurance company, visibility in front of the board of directors, lots of eyes, lots of pressure. At the first meeting, a long table, 20 people, overlapping conversations, interruptions, diagrams, and Brad, of course, running the whole thing like a show. "Emma, what do you think about the UI flow?" he throws out without looking. I barely opened my mouth when he continued. "Yeah, I thought so. We'll keep the hyperlink on the home screen and give it a modular dashboard like Apple Health, simple and brilliant." And I knew it wouldn't be brilliant. It would be a mess, and patients over 50 would just close the app. I noticed a critical UX architecture flaw. Data was scattered across screens, navigation logic was illogical, and most importantly, everything was overcomplicated, especially for the age group this product targeted. I looked at that diagram and realized they didn't see it because they were busy sounding confident, not understanding. At the next meeting, I tried to speak up again, but "Wait, let me finish." Brad cut me off. I fell silent, and at that moment, I understood. I wouldn't win the battle for the microphone. But I didn't have to win it. I had another path work. In the evenings, I started creating my own version, completely redesigned the interface, first on paper, then in Figma. Simplified navigation. Created a dynamic onboarding for new users. Added an emergency info section accessible with one tap from the home screen. Tested everything for accessibility, contrast, sizes, readability. I didn't tell anyone about it. I didn't argue. I just worked. I showed my concept only to Courtney, a colleague from another department, who sometimes joined me for lunch. "Wait, you want to show this to them?" she asked, examining my mock-up. "They'll interrupt you again, Emma, or ask why you did all this without being asked." I shrugged. "I don't want to talk. I just want them to see." Courtney smiled. "Okay, but if you nail it, I want to be the one who says, 'I saw this first.'" Inside me, there was no fear. There was a feeling like before a jump. When you've calculated everything and just jump. I wasn't going to prove anything. I was going to demonstrate. 3 weeks had passed since that meeting where I silently listened as they pushed a flawed interface architecture. The official version of PulseTrack was launched for testing. Everyone exhaled. It seemed like now it was just a matter of technicalities, but the technology failed. On Friday morning at 9:46, a message popped up in Slack. "Urgent, PulseTrack failed in closed beta. UI unresponsive for 40% of test users. Escalating." Panic in the chat, managers on calls, the tech lead was red-faced. The client, a large hospital network in Atlanta, was already demanding explanations. The problem was navigation. People simply didn't understand where to tap, and they closed the app. Brad panicked. "It's a bug. Probably the front end didn't deploy something." Number. It wasn't a bug. It was obvious from the start. I closed my laptop, looked at the mock-ups I had been hiding all this time in my folder named Silent Drafts, and I knew. The time had come. That same day, late afternoon, I approached the director's office. "Do you have 5 minutes?" I asked. Michael Fleming, VP of Product, a man with 4 IPOs on his resume and a habit of not looking you in the eye during conversations. He nodded without raising his head. "Speak." I laid my tablet on the desk, opened my version of the interface, showed the user flow, transitions, screen logic. Then I said just one sentence. "I made this 3 weeks ago. I just didn't know if I'd get a chance to speak." He was silent for a long moment, then said, "Send it to the tech team. Let them try to implement your UX on the current backend." I nodded. No emotion. No thank you. No hope so. Slack. Clarity UI concept passed user testing 87% success rate versus 38% in the original. Email from QA. New UX implementation cut dropout rate in half. Stakeholders in Atlanta approved a second round. Then, Zoom. A big meeting. Slides. Numbers. Clients. Michael turns to the team. "We found a solution. The new interface framework saved the project. Who's the author?" Someone whispers, "I think it's Emma Garcia." He looks straight at me. "Great, Emma, get us to market and we'll talk about the rest." I didn't smile, didn't raise my hands in victory. Just sat in my chair, in my body, with a feeling that was new to me. You don't have to be loud, you have to be precise. At that moment, I understood. Silence is not a weakness. It's a focus. It's a tool. It's a style. And when the storm calmed, and everyone stopped shouting, the voice that remained was mine. I was never used to being the center of attention, especially not on Zoom when there are 60 faces on screen, each with the mic off but opinions fully on. The all-hands meeting was announced suddenly. Topic: Saving Pulse Track. How the UX team found the breakthrough. Michael opened the meeting briefly. "Today, we're giving the floor to the person whose solution quite literally pulled the product back from the edge. Emma, can you walk us through how you got there?" My throat went dry. I took a sip of water and said, "When I saw the initial mock-ups, it felt like we were designing not for doctors but for designers trying to impress each other. I wasn't sure if I was allowed to say that out loud, so instead, I built my own version. First for myself, then for the user, and now, apparently for the company. Silence. The same silence I used to disappear into. But now that silence was filled with attention, I continued. My approach is simple. I listen first, then observe, then build. I believe design isn't performance, it's care. And I'm grateful that this time I was heard." After the call, I closed Zoom and thought, "That's probably it, they'll forget." But within a minute, Slack lit up. Holy crap, didn't know she had that fire. That was the most grounded explanation I've ever heard. "Can we have her run design reviews from now on?" I sat in silence. The same silence I used to avoid breaking. But now, it felt different. It was a silence of respect. The next day, I got an email from the New York team. "Emma, we'd love to invite you to join the product strategy group for an upcoming pilot initiative." I reread the message 3 times. But of course, there had to be a last word. Brad. At the next meeting, he said, "Well, similar ideas have been floating around the UX team for a while now. Glad to see our direction taking shape." Our direction? He didn't mention my name. Didn't say a word about how he'd treated me before. I didn't respond. Didn't correct him. Just looked at him. And he knew. Before, my silence was seen as weakness. Now it was seen as a choice. And in that, there was more power than in any shout. The email came in on Monday at 7:14 a.m. Sender: Michael Fleming. Subject: Special assignment. Emma, I have a proposal. A new pilot with a government agency. We're looking for a UX lead. It's a tough project, there'll be nowhere to hide. But that's exactly why we need you. I reread the email twice. Then closed my laptop. And just sat in silence. So now a leader, for real. The project was called CareBridge, a digital platform to streamline communication between hospitals and public health agencies. Startups, zero bureaucracy, a ton, and the stakes high. There was no room for error. The team was small, just 3 of us. Dave, a former mid-level UXer with a background in the old Medicare system. Tasha, a designer with a sharp tongue and chronic distrust of management. And Ryan, a front-end dev who asked in the very first meeting, "Does she even have leadership experience? Or are we getting stuck under another quiet but promising type?" I heard it, of course I did. I just nodded and said, "Doesn't matter who's been put in charge, what matters is that we know where we're going." I didn't argue. I acted. Mapped out the entire project in Trello, from UX research to final QA. Built a system of transparent goals, who does what, by when, and what counts as done. Every Friday demo. Every Tuesday sync without managers, just the team. At first, they were skeptical. But by week 3, something shifted. We started moving, fast, in sync, no wasted motion. One day, after a demo, Ryan came up to me, scratched his head, and said, "Hey, I was wrong. You're seriously holding this thing together." We've never actually felt like someone knew where we were headed. I just nodded. No resentment, no revenge. Inside, I felt something growing, not pride exactly, but certainty. Not that I was smarter, or better, just that I could do this. Without shouting, without ego, without needing permission. 2 months later, we delivered CareBridge ahead of schedule. The clients at Health and Human Services sent in their feedback. The most structured and intuitive UX logic we've seen in 5 years. That evening, when it was all over, I opened my old notebook again. On the first page, the words I had written 6 months ago were still there. What if my strength is in the silence? Now I knew the answer. When you work quietly, they underestimate you. When you start showing results, they start fearing you. Especially people like Brad Welton. He always had his hand on the levers of career movement in the company. Senior Vice President of Product. The kind of man whose approval once felt like the key to the only door that mattered. But in recent months, something had shifted. My name was coming up more and more in weekly meetings. After I spoke at Product UX Day in Austin, people who'd never even shaken my hand before started messaging me. Inside the team, I kept hearing, "Let's ask Emma, she'll know." And Brad saw all of it. On Monday, he called me into his office, closed the door, turned to me with a rehearsed smile. "You've made a lot of progress, Emma. I mean it good for you. But you haven't forgotten who brought you here, right?" I stayed quiet. He continued. "I gave you a chance. Don't forget that. Without me, you'd still be drawing wireframes for someone else's ideas." I looked at him, calm. Not defiant, just calm. And said, "You gave me assignments. The chance? I gave that to myself." He froze, just for a moment, like he didn't expect I'd dare to answer. Then his face hardened. "Do you know how careers are built in this company? It's not the loud ones who win, it's the ones who know how to play by the rules." I nodded. "Exactly, I just changed the rules." 2 days later, I found out my name had been crossed off the internal list for the Director of Product UX role. Officially, not ready yet. Unofficially, Brad had pulled strings. But then something happened he wasn't ready for. The company's CTO, Jonathan Chow, a man who rarely touches HR matters, invited me to a short Zoom. "Emma," he said, "I've been following your growth, especially on the CareBridge project. The way you structured the team, delivered ahead of schedule, and integrated feedback without friction, it was impressive. I'm recommending you for head of UX across the entire government product line. Directly. No open selection process." I sat there holding a cup of cold coffee, barely able to process what I was hearing. Why? Me? I started to ask. He smiled. Because you're rare. You don't make noise, you build. The next day, Brad didn't say a word. He stood next to me during the announcement while the CTO made it official. His hands were clasped so tightly it looked like he was holding back rage. I just nodded and said, "Thank you, I'll do the work like always." That day, I realized, silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. While others were talking, I was building. While they played corporate chess, I played the long game. And in that game, I started to win. The new office was on the 14th floor. A view of the Colorado River. White furniture. Clean lines. Silence real this time. Not the heavy kind, when I used to be afraid to hear myself think. But light. Strong. The kind of silence that lets you breathe. There was a nameplate on the door now. Emma Garcia, Head of User Experience Strategy. I walked to my new desk. Saturday down. Placed my hands on the laptop. Took a deep breath. And the thought flickered. I almost believed I wasn't made for this. That I was too quiet. Not enough charisma. Not someone who could lead, let alone inspire. In 2 weeks, I was scheduled to give my first company-wide keynote. Big hall in Dallas, 300 people in person. Plus a Zoom stream for our entire global network. I had 20 minutes. I closed my eyes. Heard Brad's voice echo in my head. Quiet people don't inspire. They don't have fire. Then my school teacher's voice. If you want to get anywhere, young lady, speak louder. I opened my eyes. And on the first slide, I typed just one sentence. Sometimes results speak louder than any voice. When the day came, I wore my favorite gray blazer, no logos, no flair. I stepped onto the stage. And for the first 5 seconds, I didn't say a word. I just stood there, looked at the crowd, and listened to the silence. It wasn't awkward. It was attentive. And then I began, quietly, without drama, without slogans. Just spoke. I showed what we'd done over the past 6 months. How our team reduced user flow time by 37% with 0 feature loss. How adaptive UI helped our government clients process 24% more requests. How UX isn't just a pretty layer, it's a system of respect for the user. I didn't wave my hands. Didn't try to fire up the room. I just connected facts, showed the meaning behind them. At the end, I said, I know I don't look like the kind of leader you're used to. I won't raise my voice just to be heard. Because I believe results speak loudest. And if we truly want to build a strong culture, maybe it's time we listen to the ones who don't shout. The room went quiet, deep, real. And then applause. First a few scattered claps, then rising. Then a standing ovation. Tasha, the same Tasha from the CareBridge team, waved from the second row. Told you, this woman holds a whole room. In a whisper. As I stepped off stage, Connecticut O. Jonathan walked up to me. He smiled and said, Every thought you had was heard, Emma. That's your superpower. Don't lose it. I walked outside, a light breeze. Saturday on a bench, and let myself smile. Not because something was handed to me, but because I took it without shouting, without slogans, without someone else's mask. Just my way. When I became head of UX, I had 17 people on my team. People with different backgrounds, personalities, ambitions. I understood. Leading them didn't mean giving loud orders. Leading meant listening. From day one, I introduced a simple rule. No shouting over each other, we discuss, not dominate. No arguing just to win, we seek to understand. Every voice matters. Every opinion deserves attention. Even the quietest person might have the sharpest insight. One week, a new intern joined our team, Jake. A young guy from Iowa. Not much experience, but full of drive. At the end of the meeting, he came up to me and said, Emma, I want to be a leader like you, calm, but effective. I always thought leaders had to be loud. But you proved it can work differently. I smiled and replied, Jake, you don't have to change who you are to be strong. Real strength is in honesty, in paying attention, and in following through. Inspired by that moment, I launched an internal program for our team. I called it Quiet Leadership: How to Lead Through Results. It was a series of short talks, practical lessons, and open discussions on how to manage people without loud speeches or spotlight performances, but with trust and outcome. We broke down real cases. We shared stories. We practiced the art of listening. The program became so successful that even upper management took notice. They asked me to lead a training series for other departments. My quiet approach started changing the company's culture. And when, at a strategy meeting, one of the managers, someone who'd once been skeptical of me, said, "Emma, your team is one of the most cohesive and effective groups we have," I felt something I hadn't expected. Pride. Quiet, steady, earned pride. Because no one ever told me I had to be loud or aggressive. I just proved that quiet leadership isn't weakness. It's a different kind of strength. When people see you lead with calm and clarity, they follow. No slogans, no shouting. And that is a real victory. I'm sitting in a cozy office on the 18th floor, downtown Austin. In front of me, a camera and studio lights. Fast Company invited me for an interview. The topic: how I became a leader without raising my voice. I look straight into the lens and say, "They used to tell me, you're too quiet to lead." But I've learned, leadership isn't in loud words. It's in action, in results, in the ability to do the work so well the work speaks for you. Behind me, on the office wall, hangs a large poster with a quote, "They told me I was too quiet to lead. I didn't speak louder. I just delivered results." Everyone who walks in sees it. And I know these aren't just words. They're my journey. I remember how it all started. Those quiet nights with a notebook, trying to figure out what it means to lead when everyone else is busy proving their worth out loud. I remember how I doubted myself, how I feared I'd never earn trust. But I chose a different path. A path of silence and focus. A path where results became my microphone. I close my laptop, stand up, step out of the office. The Austin streets are glowing in the evening light. A soft breeze stirs the leaves in the trees, and in my mind, silence. Not the kind that scares you, the kind that grounds you. That gives you strength. That reminds you, this was your real power all along. My name is Emma Garcia, and I've learned to lead without shouting, because in the end, results always speak louder than words.